So first I want to say that the retreat is not over. We've worked hard and sat endlessly, and the fruit of that effort and willingness is here, the ability to drop deep, to touch the unknown is here right now. So I would encourage you to not entertain thoughts about what you're going to do in an hour or 2 hours from now. It'll take care of itself. When the bell rings after the next silent round, then the retreat is essentially over. Your mind will provide all the necessary information so that you know where to go, what to do, how to pack, all of it. But until then, let's really give ourselves to this culmination of the days of sitting, traversing the emotional landscapes, the spiritual deserts, the disappointments, the elation, all of it. Many shifts and transformations occur near or at the end of retreat. I've seen it several times, so really just give yourself the opportunity to sit deeply with this group for the next hour and a half or so. Now, in some sense, retreat is about death. It can sound like a heavy topic or a negative topic, but the truth of it is, it's part of life. You can't have birth without death. You can't have death without birth. They're intertwined. One thing, dying, changing forms, nourishes new life in another form. It's a natural cycle. We see it in the animals, we see it in the plants, but we don't want to see it in ourselves. We don't want to see the truth of inevitability of this physical body passing away, letting go completely. And to know profoundly and finally what death is while still alive, as strange as that sounds, is possible. And I would actually say, at the core of all traditions, really is that possibility. Whether it's Christ on the cross, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Whether it's Buddha talking about cessation, which means the absolute end, or nirvana, which means blown out like a candle. To face and realize, actualize death in this life changes everything. In my experience, it's the one way to know the full spectrum of existence and non-existence, integration and disintegration. You have to get the tendency of selfing out of the way. Otherwise, it colors everything, even if it does it intermittently. To know true naturalness is such a gift. But it does require us to go through various barriers, gateless gates, fear barrier, emotional shadow, shame barriers, identity barriers, and ultimately a sort of death. You can't know what's going to come out the other side of that. It's profoundly mysterious indeed. And it's absolutely innocent. And the one thing I want to point out about it is, it's not death that's the problem, it's the fear of it. And it takes a good amount of actual insight, realization, and so forth to even start to recognize how much we fear it. It's very easy to overlook this. As it said in the poem, the rational mind cannot fear something it will not feel. So you got to get down into the shadow to even start to come into contact with this material. And some of us just were already that way growing up. It's a very uncomfortable way to live without deepening our insight. Again, that's the grace that drives us to want to awaken, to want to dig into truth. But the last thing I'll say about death that really addresses this is truth, that death itself is not a problem. It's simply part of life. It's actually staring us in the face all day long. And we keep hiding from it. We keep pulling back into the internal world to pretend it's not there. But it's the fear of it that causes the trouble, the fear of loss of control and so forth, the fear of not being in control. Ultimately, the fear of nature, fear of our own bodies, our own minds, our own thoughts. But there is a correction for that. There's a process, and that's what we're undertaking. And it goes through some incredible, surprising twists and turns. But it's the journey of all journeys. So in this last guided meditation, I just want to point out that we can always easily and effortlessly attune ourselves to nature. Not nature as an idea or an ideal. Not nature that is some pristine environment or truth that humans are not part of and we need to get back in touch with. That's our idea of nature. Nature is everything that's happening inside of you and outside of you. It's every sensation, every movement, every sound, every headache, every fingernail torn off too close, every breath, every emotion, every connection, every loss of connection. And the access is sensation, sound, and the visual mosaic. This is our access to truth. Meditation that is always available if we just let it in. And we let it in by not picking and choosing. A sound I like, a sound I don't like. A voice I can understand, a voice I can't understand. What happens if you don't pick and choose? And there's just that sound. A temperature that's a little too hot or a little too cold. What if we stop judging the sensation, and just let it in fully. The body's intelligent, it will move to the proper environment, but in the moment, it's just sensation, innocent. Why do we have to convince ourselves that we can be something apart from that sensation? Can we just fully be the warmth, the coolness, the dullness of contact, the tension point, the sensation at the surface of the skin where the air meets the skin? The dancing sound of rain at the surface of the skin, in the ears, in the head, outside the head, in the face, in front of the face. The sound is everywhere. It's in the breath. It's outside the breath. It's the sensations in the hands. It's the sensations just outside the hands. It's the sensation outside this room. What is inside and outside aside from a thought, an overlay? So the sensation goes on and on and on and on. It's not finite. It's not in one place. It's not yours. And it's not apart from you. We can't wrestle with sensation. We can't struggle against it. And we know this. So what we do is we take a picture of it, an internal reflection, and then we wrestle with the reflection. And then we don't realize we're the one. We're taking ourselves to be the one that's wrestling with it. And we're taking ourselves to be a reflection as well. And it's all just a little misunderstanding, a little bit of fear of the sense world, of full immersion. Just a little bit of inward movement. So let there just be the rain, the breathing. Let there just be the pressure or the relaxation or the tingling or the thoughts. Or the ocean of consciousness. Just let that be exactly as it is. It's complete. Without opposite. Without beginning or end. Without meaning. Without purpose. When we give meaning or purpose to a sound, it's not the sound we're giving meaning or purpose to. It's our own reflection in the mind. Sound doesn't need a purpose. It just is. Breathing doesn't need a purpose. It just is. The feeling of your hand on the dog's fur doesn't need a purpose. It just is, just as it is. When we regard everything and everyone with this complete acceptance and unconditional love, then the love simply flows outward. We don't have to look back and try to find out where it's flowing from. The game of self can come to the end. Selfishness, mine, what I need, what I want. It was just a momentary blip on the radar. Love flowing outwardly is completely natural, simple, easy, even enjoyable. Love is seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touch, and it's all the apparent composite objects and beings and non-beings composed of these sense appearances. When we don't try to make it into something for us, then what's right in front of our face is very easy to love, to appreciate, to enjoy without trying to change it at all. Can you love the rain as much as you love your lover's face? As much as you love the sensation of your body in the sheets? As much as you love any emotion that's moving through the body? Why not? Why not love indiscriminately? Love is never a problem until we disguise our own drives for finding complicity as love. When we disguise our own agendas, how I need the world to make me feel better, or I need people to make me feel better somehow. When we disguise that as love, it gets very painful. But it's not love's fault. It's the misunderstanding. Because love flows outward. It flows outward from everything. It becomes a profoundly enjoyable, even if there's nothing to grasp, nothing to keep about it. But it becomes a profoundly enjoyable and natural movement to let love flow outwardly. And that has many different forms. Doesn't necessarily look like the social conventions say it should. It's not conditional love, and it's not love only for one person or a group of people, or even just people. or even just animate beings. It's love for everything we come in contact with, and what we don't come in contact with, and what we've never been out of contact with. So love flows inwardly and outwardly when we don't try to direct it. The deeper realization goes, the higher the price you will pay for trying to direct unconditional love. If there's anything that keeps people from waking up, I think it's that. We sense the power of this. Truth, love are really one and the same. Different people have a different sort of tendency to experience it one way or the other. And as realization shifts and changes and the various movements occur, it can feel much more like simple truth that doesn't really care too much about your agendas, or doesn't care at all about your agendas. Other times it feels like profound love, support from everything around you. But the key is you really have to see you can't choose when and how. You're learning to trust nature in this process. And in nature there is a time for the warmth, support, and there's a time to have the sword of truth cut through some of what you think you are. There are figures in all religions that point to this. Christ said it several times in various forms. People think I came to spread compassion. I came with a sword. I came to spread fire upon the earth. These kinds of statements. He also spoke of love in very radical and profound ways. Loving your enemy. That's a huge challenge. Or in the Buddhist tradition, Manjusri with a sword. That's the bodhisattva of wisdom, I think, unless I got that wrong. Pretty sure that's right. In Hindu tradition, Ganesha, the remover of obstructions. These archetypes of the one who's here to cut the tethers of your delusion to free you, even free you from the delusion of you. These archetypes are very real. They can be in human form, teacher form, book form, and often, and probably most potently, they often come in the form of tragedy, disruption in the illusion that everything's going to go the way I think it should go, or the way I want it to go. There's a beautiful, very powerful archetype in Aztec traditions named Tezcatlipoca. Such a powerful being. You never heard of him. Well, maybe someone here has, but most people haven't heard of him because you've heard of his younger brother. But it's because he hides in the shadows. It means the smoking mirror. He holds a sword and he holds an onyx mirror. And if you look into his mirror, you'll never be the same. Because you'll see death. you'll see what you really are. So these movements in this process really are here. The movements meaning shifts and insights and bumping into the right people who say things that sometimes you want to hear, sometimes you don't want to hear, but they cause changes or alterations in your experience and even your identity. They're also techniques, self-inquiry, moo, very, very powerful, transformative entity there. So these call them entities, call them conditions arising that bear the sword to cut you from your own delusion. It's important to realize you're not always going to want to feel that, of course. You just aren't, by definition. But by cutting those tethers that turn you inward, that turn you into the house of mirrors of me and my problems and my realization and my, me. The sword that cuts you from those tethers that are so strongly habituated and encouraged by others, by being around others who are doing the same thing without knowing it. That's the sort of wisdom. It allows you to turn back to what is, to see what is as it is, to hear, feel, taste again. And that's the result of that, is a realignment with unconditional love, which only flows outward. So they work hand in hand. The bodhisattva of compassion and the bodhisattva of wisdom, they work hand in hand. Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca, hand in hand. Birth and death, hand in hand. Christ, the Christ that spoke of unconditional love, and the Christ that spoke of spreading fire upon the earth, hand in hand. You can't have this process, you can't undergo this process without feeling that sword at times. But you also probably can't undergo this process without feeling the warm embrace of loving support of nature, of the universe, of truth.